What's up, everybody? This is Professor Keegan, and this is a picture of the Stonewall Inn. So we've finally arrived at our gay liberation unit. We're starting off with a discussion of Stonewall, and there's quite a bit of content for this asynchronous day in class. So this is a quick video because you have Outrage 69 to watch. You also have a collection from Forever Stonewall to look at, and then a very short video on STAR, Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries. So I'm just going to briefly offer some framing for these materials. And again, we are now in the gay liberation period. So we did talk last session about Compton's cafeteria riot, which predated Stonewall by 6 years, and was a riot at an all-night cafe in San Francisco, started basically by transgender women who the police had been harassing. And here on the other side of the country in New York City, we have a similar riot, anti-police riot, starts at a gay bar where police have come to raid it. And people fight back. So we're thinking about a nationwide kind of change in tactics coming out of the Lavender Scare period into the 60s. People had decided to militantly resist the conditions that had begun under kind of the McCarthy period. So really quickly, a little bit of framing about this unit. Before Identity was a unit about how long it actually took LGBTQ people to develop a shared sense of political identity as a minority in the United States. So we are now in the period where people started realizing they needed to respond politically to the situation they were experiencing. And we saw the homophiles begin that in the mid-1960s. With picketing and peaceful protest and educational outreach. By the late 60s, we have full-fledged militant direct resistance to police brutality by queer people as a group. So the late 1960s marked the beginning of gay politics based on a sense of shared identity as a political minority. Now, remember that many of the people working in the gay liberation movement had also done work in the civil rights movement, in the student movement, in the non-war effort, in second wave feminist communities. And so all of these movements are influencing and enforcing one another. So we need to think about them intersectionally. We need to think about how the activist models developed in movements like civil rights are percolating and traveling over into things like gay liberation. How consciousness raising, which was a strategy used by second wave feminists to help kind of wake people up to the political context of their own experiences, right? This is also something that is kind of going on over in the gay liberation movement. So tactics, strategies, and frameworks are being shared. But there are two semi-distinct groups of people. So we kind of ended talking about this last week, but there were the homophiles. They kind of predate Stonewall. They are largely white and middle class organizers who largely met in private spaces, had access to professional communities, and were organizing to demand equality for homosexuals, right, under the law. And so these were people who were kind of using the term homosexual to make a set of claims about their oppression as a group of people who like had a condition, right? And so therefore should not be discriminated against because it, like being a homosexual was an involuntary condition. And so we see them using that term homosexual in their literature quite a bit. Whereas the gay radicals, we might call them, are a different group of people who are using the word gay and who are largely working class and interracial groups. They are meeting in these queer subcultural spaces, public spaces like bars and cafes, diners, places like that. And they are experiencing the direct police harassment that a lot of the homophile groups are avoiding. So homophiles are mad about job discrimination, whereas gay radicals are people who are just trying to kind of get out of the way of the police, who are kind of harassing them and arresting them and making their lives generally miserable. So there are two distinct sets of problems here. And there are two distinct sets of strategies that we're going to see. The homophiles are picketing, they're holding town halls, they're doing interviews with professional organizations, they're lobbying local government. They're the kind of people who have the kind of respectable backgrounds where they might actually get attention in those circles, whereas the gay radicals are throwing bricks, they're fighting in the streets, they are taunting the police, they're doing kind of more direct action. So what we see in this era is a new militancy to gay activism, a new willingness to fight police physically, a new willingness to resist physically the conditions of the oppressive laws that are being applied to the queer population. As police harassment increased during the Vietnam era, queer people began to reject this apologetic, non-confrontational model that the homophile organizations are using, and to develop other strategies. Between 1959 and 1969, we see anti-police queer riots break out in major cities across the country. All of these anti-police riots are led by working class people of color and or trans people. Again, a very different kind of group of people, the people absorbing the brunt of the police harassment. They're the people kind of being directly resistant in response. We see the development of new militant activist groups. There was a branch of the Mattachine Society, which was a homophile group that was actually a lot more aligned with these more liberationist or radical strategies. That was the Washington branch of the Mattachine. There was Vanguard, which was discussed in Screaming Queens. There was the Gay Liberation Front. This is a picture behind me of one of their posters, kind of calling for people to come join the group. The Queens Liberation Front, which was a trans-specific version of GLF, the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, which was the group founded by Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. All of these are moving from that prior strategy of strategic discretion we talked about with the Littauer reading that the homophiles were very much using, this like strategically discrete style of activism, toward this new politics of coming out as a different kind of political strategy. In fact, this poster, when we look at this poster in class, you'll see that below these kids is the call, come out, right, with a big exclamation point. So coming out was a new way of taking up public space, being queer in public space, non-apologetically, through direct action, sit-ins, marches, and, if necessary, violent resistance. It was very different from the survival strategies developed by people during the 1950s. So we're going to look at how this shifted. And then we'll also look at the aftermath. So the first half of Outrage 69 talks a lot about the actual kind of immediate context of Stonewall. And then the second half talks about the post-Stonewall fragmentation of the community into various identity-based groups with different political agendas. And one reason why I assigned this film, even though it's from 1995, so it's quite old, is that it actually does give a really rich picture, on-the-ground picture of the various intersectional alliances and disagreements in the community in the 1960s and 70s. And it's actually one of the only documentaries on Stonewall that doesn't completely erase trans people from the conversation, because we do have Sylvia Rivera in this video. So we're hearing from people who were like directly involved, and then we hear about kind of the subsequent 15 years after Stonewall. So we get a very rich picture of the varying perspectives in post-Stonewall LGBTQ politics. And so what I'd like you to do as you watch is take note of the different groups that are forming. We have GLF, Gay Liberation Front. We have GAA, the Gay Activists Alliance. We have Salsa Soul Sisters, and we also have STAR, right? These are just some of the groups that formed, but they interview people from all of these groups. And I'd like you to be thinking when you watch about who seems to be drawn to these different groups, and what are the basic positions or demands of each group, and why do they disagree, and again, what are they doing about it? I think it's important to understand the fallout of Stonewall, and how that leads us to the AIDS era and the kinds of impacts AIDS had on the community by thinking about how people aligned themselves in the immediate years after Stonewall. So we're going to have a conversation about that. And then next week, we're going to be looking at some of the actual activist literature produced by these groups to see what kinds of demands they were making. So try to track some of this in your note taking so that we get a good sense of kind of the varying ideas, demands, strategies that people were developing at the time. So that's all I'm going to say for now because you have quite a bit to look at. So I'll end this now and I'll look forward to seeing what you thought of the videos and the collection. Okay.